Welcome to the Athletic Baseball Show's live trade deadline special. Derek VanRiper here with Eno Sarris. Over the course of the next hour or so, we're going to break down the frenzy of trades that have taken place really over the last 96 hours or so. Obviously, a huge day on Tuesday. We got about 30 minutes before the deadline hits us at 6 Eastern. And something tells me, we're not done with moves yet. Not even close.
There's still a bevy of names out there waiting for Wilson Contreras, Noah Syndergaard. There's some big names still out there. I don't know if the A's guys with team control, I think we would have heard some smoke about Sean Murphy and Ramon Laureano if they were going to get traded, but they could still get traded. So there's some late news on Pablo Lopez to maybe the Dodgers. So there's still some big names out there, but it's pretty hectic. I think this has been one of the better deadlines I can remember.
I mean, I think the trade of the day, of course, is the
I don't know which one you're talking
trade.
about.
What could it possibly be? It's the Juan Soto and Josh Bell trade going to the Padres. C.J. Abrams, Robert Hassel, Mackenzie Gore, Harleen Sassana, James Wood, and we found out at the end, Luke Voigt, all going back to the Nationals. This isn't the only move that the Padres made. This was the trade that really shocked the baseball world, even though from the beginning, I thought the Padres, with that trio of young players especially, had the core you were looking for to possibly get a deal done. And just seeing it alongside the other moves the Padres have made makes this an exciting day to be a Padres fan.
Yeah, it's crazy. They gave up Victor Acosta, who's one of their top prospects too, for Brandon Drury, and that's a bit of a rental and a guy who's done most of the damage in Cincinnati. So they've really just pushed all their chips in. I mean, with the Hader deal and with the deal for Soto, there's nothing left. They got Luis Campusano and some looking to the left and looking to the right. So I like it. I love the chips all in approach. It's not just chips all in on one deadline, I don't think, because they get Soto for another couple of years. And so it's not all just now. Plus, I think with the trade of Eric Hosmer to Boston, they might have just open up a little bit of salary for next year and the year after that they can play with to continue to sort of add depth around their core. But the core here, Tatis, Soto, Machado, and I'm a Cronenworth guy, so I'm gonna throw him in there. But obviously he's like the fourth musketeer, but he's the kind of player you need, right? Like they even with Profar, even with the problems, the shortcomings he's had as a player, like now you've got a real team. Now you've got and he addressed, I think, the worst part of the Padres offense is they are below average when it comes to getting on base. They're below average when it comes to chasing at balls outside the zone. They're below average at barreling. And lo and behold, you get basically the best plate discipline god, in Juan Soto. And then both of them are good at barreling the ball. And they're going to replace two of the worst positions on that team. And frankly, among the contenders, that right field outfit, that right field position for the Padres and first base were among the worst single spots for any of the contenders. So you kind of take some of your worst spots among contenders to the best. And I was looking at the projections. I think the Padres are going to move into the top 5 with this. So I think it's a legitimate move. Sometimes when you make these little moves, you're like, oh, I got a half win here, a half win here. No, they moved up about 3-4 wins in 2 months with this trade. And so I think they're a legitimate top 5 team, which makes them a contender to win it all.
Yeah, we talked about them and how they stack up to the Dodgers about 3 weeks ago now. At that time, the Padres offense, which has been without Tatis all season long, was a tick below league average. You think about them now adding Soto, hopefully getting Tatis back soon. That definitely closes the gap on their biggest weakness. I think in terms of bullpen firepower, that Josh Hader trade, which is just sort of lost in the shuffle, that makes them a lot better too. And one of the strengths of this team really for the last few seasons has been bullpen depth, but now they get one of the game's premier relievers in a swap that sends Taylor Rogers, who'd struggled recently, back to Milwaukee. So how much better are the Padres now in the late innings after making that move?
It's fair to wonder because Hader's hit some bumps in the road, just like Rogers, and so I think it's actually an interesting question. So Hader's release point has dropped maybe an inch or two. It's a very small amount, but his release point is very important to his deception because he pitches from way out here, but he pitches kind of overhand from way out here. So if it drops a little bit, it can affect his stuff. If you look at his stuff plus numbers, they are kind of up and down, and so are Rogers's. Now, Rogers's are just down for 2 months because I think he made a poor decision. He went to a sweeper slider, added 2 inches of horizontal movement, but lost vertical movement, lost velocity, and lost command of that pitch and lost stuff overall. What's easier to do? Tell Taylor Rogers, throw your old slider again, or get Hader's release point back to where it was, a month ago? I think that's almost a philosophical question, or maybe one that a pitching coach would better be able to tell us. But if you just look at the entirety of what they've done, yes, Hader is better than Taylor Rogers, and they got better. And I think this is interesting to watch today. They had Devin Williams, who's taken over for him, and this is a great opportunity for him, sounding so sad. Because it's just like he's like, why did we get worse at the deadline? We're in first place.
I know you're trying to rile me up, and I'm gonna stay calm because we have a long way to go. But I'll say it with 22 minutes and change before the deadline. I don't fully understand this approach if you're in the Brewers position because they're not a team on the bubble for a wild card. I understand playing the middle and thinking more about the future if you're in the position of the Red Sox right now, even if you're in the position of a team like the Phillies. It's more about how do you make your team better, not just for the rest of this season, but for 2023 and beyond. The Brewers should have been more in an all-in sort of mode. Maybe they'll make one more move and I'll stand corrected, but I think
Trevor Rosenthal?
Well, yeah, Trevor Rosenthal. They got Matt Bush in a small trade with the Rangers on Monday night. There's more depth in that bullpen, but one of the things that made the Brewers so dangerous the last couple of postseasons was if they protected a lead, they got to the 7th inning in a close game, it was over. You turn it over to last year it was Boxberger and then Devin Williams and Hader, and you just felt like that was it. I realized it didn't quite play out that way. Freddie Freeman had that huge home run off of Hader that eventually led to the Brewers being eliminated. But I think taking away from that strength is something that could be particularly costly. Looking back at the Padres for just a moment, they'll see the Dodgers 12 more times this year. So it's a big lead in the NL West. They could chew into that. And obviously, this is more about what happens in the postseason than where exactly they might be seated going into it. But I think if you're the Padres, you're now comparing yourself to the Yankees, to the Dodgers, to the elite of the elite teams, to the Mets, to the Braves, anybody else you put in that conversation, the Astros. The Padres are absolutely in the thick of things. And Josh Bell, an afterthought, the second player in this deal, becomes even more important because Luke Voit was shipped away as part of the trade. So they actually get a bit of an upgrade there going from Voit to Bell in the everyday lineup.
Yeah, I mean, Voit was surging barrel-wise, but I looked at his last 30, and he was below league average by WRC+, so that surging didn't quite turn into a remaking or a refinding of the Fountain of Youth, I think. The Bell-Voit upgrade and the Soto-Hosmer upgrade, both of them are huge and important. And, as the fact that Bell is a switch hitter, is also important because when you bring Drury in, now you can play the sort of righty-lefty game, in the corner outfield or a DH or at second base. You can move guys around. You become much more versatile and flexible, which are GM buzzwords that are very important. But what you can also do is just plug in Josh Bell wherever. DH, he can play some outfield, first base. As a switch hitter, you don't have to platoon that spot anymore. Eric Hosmer was becoming so useless against lefties that you kind of had to platoon him, which meant Cronenworth sliding over to first. Who plays at second behind Cronenworth? Yeah.
It creates a leak eventually when you operate that way. We will dig a lot into the Nationals' long-term outlook a little bit later on in the show. We're going to focus on the contenders here at the top part of the show. Let's get to the Yankees for a few minutes here, because obviously they've had a very active deadline stretching all the way back to the addition of Andrew Benintendi at the end of last week. But it really seemed like the need for starting pitching became urgent with the injury to Luis Severino. They go out and they get Frankie Montas from the A's along with Lou Trevino as another bullpen booster. And they give up 4 young players, 3 pitchers in the return: Ken Waldichuk, JP Sears, Luis Medina, and Cooper Bowman, an infielder, I believe, at high A right now, all going back to the A's in this trade. Comparing it to what the Reds got in the return for Luis Castillo, it seems a tad on the light side, but the health of Frankie Montas, of course, could be a factor in the difference between those two packages.
Yeah, you had to see the velo bump, the velo loss that came with the shoulder problems that Montas reported earlier this season. So I guess that made people nervous, but I actually don't think that that's the only reason that this came in the way it did. I think that the A's are hyper focused on near and ready, and they just love AA, AAA, up and down guys. And, that describes at least Sears and Waldichuk, who are, I would guess, leading this package. But just compare it to the Reds package that has 2 shortstops in it. Yes, the shortstops are young. Yes, they're far away. Yes, it may not work out. Yes, there's so many things that can go wrong. But gosh, would I rather have Noelvis Martinez than wait, did I say it wrong?
Yeah, Noelvi Marte.
Noelvi Martinez. I'd rather have him than any of these guys. Sorry to these guys. But I even got some feedback from some A's players on a similar level. So it's something that they see. It's something that is weird. So they've had success with Cole Irvin and Paul Blackburn, taking guys with multiple pitches that have command. None of them look that good by stuff. I have heard that, something people think that the A's think that stuff is too expensive on the market because now teams all have stuff metrics. They're all looking for stuff. So, now the A's are kind of pivoting and doing what they always do. That's the Moneyball part of it, is they're saying, hey, if stuff is so expensive, let's get guys with a bunch of pitches in command. And so Sears could be that guy. But I would say personally, you could probably get 5 Sears and get 1 Blackburn out of him. So, I think that's part of why I'm not super into this package. But maybe it works with their park, with their philosophy, with what's worked in the past. Maybe, they'll get 2 starting pitchers out of this, and 2 starting pitchers with years of control over 1 starting pitcher who has to go and is getting more expensive. I guess that's the deal.
Yeah. I mean, do you feel, when you look at all the moves the Yankees made, Benintendi, Scott Efros, part of that too, did they do enough to fix their weaknesses? And again, maybe they could make a move here in the next 15 minutes. How do you feel about the overall upgrades that Brian Cashman made?
I like it. And one of the reasons I like it is, if you think about the Yankees, you think like huge, fire breathing, throw hard, hit hard, miss hard kind of guys. I think Benintendi is not that. I think Scott Efros throws from a really interesting arm angle that kind of gives them more of that A's approach, where it's like, hey, we've got all these different arm angles. It's not just, kind of over the top righties that throw real hard and have spin and have a breaking ball off that, So, I think those 2 guys give them different looks. I like that. And then I'm a Montas guy. Like, I saw somebody telling me he wasn't a 1 or 2. I don't know if he's a true 1. And we had this discussion on the 3-0 show. I mean, on Rates and Barrels, like, even people doubt if Luis Castillo is a true 1. So if Luis Castillo is not a true 1, then Frankie Montas is not a true 1 for me. But there's still room for a 2. You have a 1. Cole. You go Cole, Montas. I mean, I think that's better. Then you can mix and match with all those other guys, and it just makes the whole thing better. It provides a little bit of safety blanket for if Nestor Cortez is gonna he's blowing past his previous innings highs. What's gonna happen there? Some of those, even Jordan Montgomery. Some of these guys, aren't guys who've gone full seasons of innings and postseason. So here's Montas. Hopefully he stays in one piece long enough, but he does have the stuff to start your second game of your postseason.
I'm wondering if Lou Trevino ends up being a bit of a sneaky addition for the Yankees, if there's something they might change with him, because I've been very skeptical of him as a high leverage late inning reliever. And if a team like the Yankees makes a move for him, there might be a good reason for that. So that's something I'm interested to see here in the weeks ahead.
I had a fun moment. I was sitting with the scouts watching Lou Trevino pitch, and they all sort of asked me, like, what does the model say? Like, let's test it here. We do this for a living. What does your model say? Come on, bust it out. And I was looking at it, and I was like, dude has 5 or 6 pitches, but only 3 of them are good. I don't know why he throws the other 3. He should just stop throwing the four seam and the cutter like right now. I don't know why he does this. And they were all like, that's all right. And it kind of speaks to me a little bit like, this is where I got a little bit scouty, where I said it's like nervousness about his stuff, right? Why are you throwing 6 pitches as a reliever? That's weird. Well, it's because you don't believe in your stuff. So I think if I acquired him, I'd be like, hey, this is how good your sinker is. This is where we have it rated. This is how good your splitter is. This is where we have it rated. This is how good your slider is. This is where I have it rated. Just throw these pitches, man. These are good pitches. Let's throw these pitches and let's go. So, I think, and on anybody with velo that high, I think deserves you put the upside moniker on him and say, hey, if we tweak something, at least he throws hard.
Let's get to some moves that the Twins made. They got starting pitching help with Tyler Mahle. 3 players going back to Cincinnati in that deal: Spencer Steer, Stephen Haar, and Christian Encarnacion Strand. And of course, they added Jorge Lopez earlier in the day through a trade with the Orioles. And it sounds like Michael Fulmer is headed to Minnesota here as well. So 2 potential additions in the bullpen and 1 pretty big addition in the rotation. What should we expect from Tyler Mahle getting out of Great American Ballpark?
I had him ranked in the 70s, in the mid 70s among pitchers in my last ranking, but a lot of that had to do with Cincinnati, because this is a guy who has above average stuff in command on his fastball and slider and splitter. Just to have that trio of pitches at your disposal, you get him out of Cincinnati. I think I would move him into the last bit of the 50s. I see him as somewhere around Alex Cobb, as now a guy who's going to get your strikeouts. I think the 3.75 away ERA for Mahle's career is more indicative of what kind of a pitcher he is. So if we're going to get into the whole like 1, 2, 3, argument again, I don't think the Twins got a 1. And maybe they don't have a 1, but their approach of gathering 2s and 3s continues. And I don't think, other than maybe Encarnacion Strand, I think that's maybe one of the biggest pieces they gave up. Otherwise, I think they did a really good job of getting the underrated group. Michael Fulmer was on my list of, potential steals at the deadline. And every bit as good as, say, maybe a David Robertson, but cheaper, maybe possibly in trade. I haven't seen the actual return. I think they did a good job. I think they needed pitching and they got pitching. Were they ever going to be the team that sends away a lot of players for Luis Castillo or, goes on hard on Frankie Montas? I think we're seeing now that the truth of the matter is they're not going to be that team.
Yeah, and looking here at Ken Rosenthal's Twitter account, the Phillies are close on Noah Syndergaard. They became pretty active today. I mean, the Phillies have already made a couple of interesting moves. One pretty surprising one, just in the sense that I didn't expect to see Brandon Marsh get traded today. It was Brandon Marsh straight up for Logan O'Hoppe, one of their top position player prospects, a catcher. I like this trade actually for both teams because it fills clear needs in both organizations. The Angels have been a little crowded in the outfield for a couple of seasons now. It does feel like they're selling low on Marsh at this time, but do you think the Phillies can maybe get this strikeout rate down and get Brandon Marsh's bat on track either down the stretch this season or possibly in 2023 and beyond?
Yeah, I like this comment here. Trading Marsh feels like too soon to give up on him, but here's another one. They needed a catcher. Both of these things are true. And so, I was reading along that trade and I was like, ooh, Brandon Marsh is a guy who barrels the ball, plays really good center field defense. He fills a need the Phillies have. They would have him for a long time. I'd like it. Cost him Logan O'Hoppe. Because I just know that internally they love Logan, and the metrics are really good on him as a guy who can make contact and make powerful contact. An offensive catcher, maybe as we're headed into the time of automated balls and strikes, I think we might only be a year, 2 years out from having automated balls and strikes. All of a sudden, being able to have an offensive catcher gives you a really big boost on the competition, where the other teams will have to sort through all the framers, all the sort of below average offense framers they have that are no longer have a useful skill for baseball. That's going to be a sad moment. But I believe in Marsh for fantasy purposes. I think this is a good move for him. It's a nice offensive landing for him. Also, I just like the idea that he's going to work with a new hitting coach. There's something in there that I see. I see the raw power with the exit velo. The max exit velo is high. I see the barrel rate. And then I just see that he chases a little bit too much, and he doesn't walk, and he strikes out too much. I just feel like there might be one tweak in his approach, maybe even more than his mechanics, that might allow him to really shine. So I think that he has more upside to me than Mickey Moniak. And so I think that, in some ways this was a good trade, although I think it'll hurt a little bit with Logan O'Hoppe. And if they get Syndergaard, I like it too. He's a guy who has multiple pitches in command. He's more of a get you there guy than a what do we do when we're there guy. I think we've been sort of creating that dichotomy on our shows. It's like get you there means get you to the playoffs. I don't know if I want him starting game one, but they got Aaron Nola. Maybe he's fine for game two if you got the quick hook. Some days, the fastball is bad. Oh, we got the
What's by popular
Dodgers
demand.
And Blue Jays?
What?
What? Mitch
What are
White?
those two teams doing?
What is happening?
Yeah, what is happening?
Wait till we get
one?
the details on that. But
well, I would love to see Mitch White possibly get an opportunity somewhere else if that's what this is about. So we'll get some more details on that momentarily. While we await that, let's take a look at the Astros moves at this deadline. They were part of a 3-team trade. Trey Mancini ends up in Houston. Jose Siri goes to the Rays. Prospects moving in that deal as well. And of course, the Astros were the team that acquired Christian Vasquez from Boston in a separate trade. Emmanuel Valdez, kind of a sneaky pickup for the Red Sox. I think he was going to have to be added to the 40-man roster this offseason, so maybe a slight win for Boston, just getting someone that wouldn't have been available without that 40-man crunch. But as you look at what the Astros have done with about 5 minutes to go before we hit the deadline, they also added Will Smith in a swap with Atlanta for Jake Odorizzi. Did they fix their flaws to the point where you feel like they're ready to go for October?
I like the Trey Mancini upgrade. I think that they needed help there at first. DH, they needed another bat, and one thing about Mancini that hurt him was that change in the outfield dimensions in Baltimore. He's a right-hander, and they took away his pull power alley, and I think that was a big part of why his power went down. Well, good news is you go to the Astros. And, they have the Crawford boxes. They have this really nice low hanging power alley for you. So I could see him, he's only projected to hit, 9 more homers. I could see him kind of going off, quote unquote, and hitting like 15 homers over the next 2 months, just getting, just depositing them in the Crawford boxes. That isn't, maybe as big a splash as some people wanted them to make, but the Astros are such a good team that are just up and down. They weren't really desperate for anything at this deadline. So I think just adding something that didn't cost too much and might fit their ballpark really well, and also fits their philosophy of not striking out too much. They're a team that makes contact and makes powerful contact, and Mancini does that for them.
Yeah, I think the moves they made were very measured. They do get better in a few key spots. I think when we thought Wilson Contreras was going to move, Houston was among the most logical places to put him. They didn't necessarily need a big offensive upgrade, but they certainly had room for an upgrade at that position. Getting Vasquez provides that. Getting Mancini over Yuli Gurriel, I think, offers that as well. And I think Will Smith, when you take a situation like the Astros have where they actually had a few innings to spare with Lance McCullers getting close to returning from the IL, flipping Odorizzi for a possible late inning high leverage arm, and Will Smith makes that bullpen one deeper as well.
That's very much, I think, do we do something that for there, or do we do something for getting there? And I think they said, you know what, we're going to get there. So let's do something for when we get there. And I think Will Smith was just a better fit because they do have multiple pitchers that can go long, and Will Smith fits more of that, get lefties out sort of philosophy. The trade seems to be Mitch White to Toronto for prospects. I agree with one of the commenters that said, why would you go to the Dodgers to get someone that you think you can tweak? The Dodgers are really good at tweaking pitchers. The one thing I would say, I guess, is he still throws 2 times as many four seams as sliders, and his slider is rated much more highly than his four seam by my model. So I could see them not only tweaking that difference and having him throw the slider a lot more, but also maybe the changeup, throwing that more too. So maybe they have something they see there in White's profile. In my model overall, it says he's a guy with okay stuff, a really good slider, nothing much else, and below average command. Not necessarily someone that popped in my model as someone to acquire, but I do know that the Blue Jays have their own sort of stuff and command numbers internally, and that sometimes mine have not been exactly the same as theirs. So maybe they see something in that changeup or in that profile that they like better than my model likes.
I also don't think Mitch White's that bad. Like, pitching depth is hard to get, and he's good control.
More you can depend on than Nate Pearson right now.
Sure.
Oh, look at this. That's why Jordan Montgomery left town. Jordan Montgomery is leaving the Yankees.
He left town. I didn't realize he left town.
Well, I was like, why is he going to the Cardinals?
But wow, here you go. Yeah.
Looks like we're getting some news here that he might be traded for Harrison Bader.
Yeah, Jack Curry of the Yes Network has the Yankees sending Jordan Montgomery to the Cardinals for Harrison Bader. So there's a late trade I wasn't expecting.
Center field defense has been a bit of a concern for the Yankees because even though Aaron Hicks has been playing well offensively, I think that he's beyond his peak defensively. So I guess you put Bader in center more often and you move Hicks around. It probably means less playing time for Bader, but if you trade Jordan Montgomery for Bader, I think you might be installing him in center.
Yeah, you're definitely planning on playing Bader.
Just gave up something real. Yeah,
for sure. I think there's still going to be a lot of news coming in over the next half hour. Even though the deadline is in about a minute, we know that there are things that are, as long as the paperwork's filed, we're just waiting to get confirmation that things actually came through. So don't be surprised if a few more names trickle in the next little while. Looks like we do have more details on the previously mentioned possibility that Noah Syndergaard was on the move. It is going to be Noah Syndergaard going to the Phillies, with Mickey Moniak and Yadiel Sanchez going back to the Angels as part of that deal. Jason Stark of The Athletic just tweeted that a few minutes ago. So, you mentioned Thor before. He's not the pre-injury Thor, but he's still at least a mid-rotation sort of starter.
Yeah, actually, I should have mentioned this when we were talking about Tyler Mahle. There's only 3 starters available or traded at this deadline that had both above average stuff and command. Mahle had like a 100.9 stuff, so he barely makes the list. But that was Mahle, Castillo, and Montas. So that's one class of guys who can do both things. And then, Syndergaard was the best of the rest in that he had the best command of anybody and the widest pitch mix. He's a little bit closer to Quintana than you may want to hear, because he doesn't have the same stuff as he used to, but he has more pitches than Quintana. And I think there's still some tweaks he can do. Like, for example, he showed up on my list of underthrown pitches, high stuff pitches that weren't thrown enough. And that was the curveball. He started throwing the curveball more. So maybe that's something the Phillies will have him do too, is just stop throwing the 4-seam, man.
Yeah, still more to come. We'll keep an eye out for other trades as we continue breaking down some of the things that have already happened. We should talk about the Dodgers for a minute because they're on the list of teams where I expect other move. I think something else has to happen. As it stands right now, it's Joey Gallo in, Chris Martin for bullpen depth. Clayton Beeter was sent back to the Yankees in a 1-for-1 swap for Gallo. And right now, that's one of the more surprising deals of this deadline. I didn't really expect the Dodgers to be the team to take the chance on Gallo.
You know, I wonder, you have the Mets and the Dodgers who both are expensive teams that have spent a lot of money on the teams they have right now. Both teams that project in the top 3 that have been really good teams all year. And both teams that maybe have had more mellow deadlines, right? And I think maybe that's on purpose. You know, you're seeing some really big names being thrown around this year. I think there's more higher prospects than usual being traded this year. And I think with the Mets and Dodgers, they just said, hey, we have a really good team. We're going to really, if we're going to improve our team slightly in the margins anyway, let's just improve our team slightly in the margins and do it for cheap. You know, so like, let's get Darren Ruff to hit, hit lefties, and let's get Vogelbach to hit lefties. And for the Dodgers, let's just, take a flyer on Gallo. He's going to be better than Jake Lamb. You know, let's take a 80 raw power guy and see if our hitting coaches can get, or maybe just making him feel wanted. Have you seen those Q&As that have come out from Gallo? The piece that Lindsay Adler did, like, just make him feel like he's wanted and he's in a place where he's valued, and maybe he'll relax and stop pressing and be a useful part of that team. I mean, it's not improbable. He's been a really good player in the past. So, I think I can see the Mets and Dodgers. This makes sense to me, and it's a little bit annoying because if you're a fan of a front running team, you're like, hey, go get Soto, get better. But they're really good teams, like Michael Givens, really good player. It's not Josh Hader, but it costs you a lot less. And Michael Givens throws, that same kind of low slot, overhand, type deceptive pitch that I think maybe a lot of people in the NL East have seen, and if you haven't seen Michael Givens much, you're probably going to whiff a fair amount. So, I like what the Mets have done. I like what the Dodgers have done. It's just very small stuff.
Got another breaking news trade to pass along. Mark Feinsand, MLB.com, has Whit Merrifield going to the Blue Jays for Samad Taylor and Max Castillo, who you've talked about a few times as an interesting young pitcher. So obviously, I would imagine the Jays have some assurance that Whit Merrifield is going to get vaccinated and be allowed to play in home games.
Which he sort of said he might for a contender, which is a strange.
I guess we're left to assume that that's going to happen. But the Royals have had such a difficult time developing pitching. Max Castillo, this is a pretty clear path for him to get a lot of innings in the near future.
Yeah, and the model likes his fastball shape, which is a great first step. It doesn't love the changeup, but I would say that models in general, as I've heard from team people, analysts, they struggle with changeups, and there's often a look at the results that the player has on the changeup before you look at your stuff number, basically. So you got the good fastball shape, which is really important because the Royals have a hard time developing fastball shape. And then you look at a changeup that's gotten above average whiffs. Let me see here what else it's done. It's been hit for a decent ISO, but there's a 216 batting average against it so far. So that's the core there. But he also throws a curveball and a slider that there's just so few of that I wouldn't necessarily breathlessly report the numbers, but they have above average stuff. So 4-pitch mix and a TBD on the changeup, good fastball shape. I think he instantly becomes one of the better young pitchers on the Royals team in terms of who I'm excited about, because the only thing I can say otherwise is that they have Lynch, who has many pitches, but none are that good. And then they have Heasley, who has a good slider, but has seemingly having trouble putting it together on the field. So, I'm not that big a fan of Brady Singers, but perhaps he's the best now guy. And then Max Castillo is one of the better future guys for them. For the Blue Jays on this side, I think Whit Merrifield is another attempt to do what they did with Raimel Tapia, which is to give their lineup that different look. They have the big boppers. They have the guys who can hit the ball hard. Let's improve our ability to make contact. Let's be able to run the bases. It didn't work with Raimel Tapia, so I'm hoping they get a better result on the Whit Merrifield trade, because that's what Whit Merrifield brings you primarily. He does not hit the ball hard. He can get on base, but it's mostly about putting the ball in play and running around.
Yeah, the Jays made a move earlier in the day with the Marlins, adding some bullpen depth, getting Zach Pop and Anthony Bass back as part of a trade for Jordan Groshans. As far as Pop and Bass go, how do they look in the model, and how much of an impact do you think they have in that relief corps?
They're really good. Bass has a straight fastball, but because when he went to the bullpen and threw real hard, he can kind of throw past his shape a little bit. But he also throws a ton of sliders now. That's something new for him, and that's helped him look better. And I think the same thing might happen for Zach Pop, because the model really likes his slider, but it's his sinker that he's been using a ton of to get ground balls. They said in the announcement of the trade, it's a little bit like Zach Britton. They think that there's a power sinker there that can really get the ground balls. However, if I had Zach Pop, I might go 50-50 slider sinker usage, get more strikeouts and the ground balls. And so I think that's a certain possibility for him. Either way, Pop is underrated, and he hasn't even hit arbitration yet. So this is a long-term and short-term deal. And Groshans just doesn't hit the ball hard. I know he's still some high on some prospects lists, and I think that's just an artifact of where he was picked and where he was in the past. He does not hit the ball hard. If you do not hit the ball hard, your ceiling as an outcome, I think, is a utility player. I see he could be like a Mauricio Dubon or something. I don't think that Dubon himself has been traded multiple times for relievers. So, I think this was a fine trade. That part was a fine trade for them. We'll see how the Whit Merrifield one works out.
Yeah, I think with Groshans, like, you have to look at the Jays' willingness to move. A similar situation a year ago, Austin Martin was still more highly regarded at the time of that trade, but Austin Martin being part of the Jose Barrios deal may have been a sign that they didn't see some of the things they were hoping to see from him in the contact quality numbers as well. So really strange deadline, though, for the Blue Jays. I thought they were among the teams that might be a little more aggressive with the upgrades. We'll see if they get something else that comes in here in the last few minutes. Seeing a tweet from Ken Rosenthal that the Cubs are not trading Wilson Contreras, and they're not trading Ian Happ. Now, I think Happ's got one more year left. Contreras, they could give the qualifying offer at the end of the season and maybe possibly work out a long-term deal.
But change the math.
A lot of hugs for nothing.
That probably changed the math on Contreras, honestly, because whatever prospect you're coming in, you have to think is going to be better than the pick you're going to get, the prospect you'll get with that pick. So you're kind of trying to model out the pick that you'll get, the player you'll get, and then you're trying to compare that to what people are offering you. And then outside chance that you sign him to an extension, because he's been an important part of that team, and catchers don't grow on trees. And like I said, if it goes to automatic balls and strikes, Wilson Contreras becomes one of the best catchers in the game.
Robert Murray of Fansided reporting the Giants have not traded Carlos Rodon or Jock Peterson, so they are staying put.
I think that makes sense. If you look at the deals that they made, they were kind of like treading water type deals, right? Like, you send out Darren Ruff, you get JD Davis. I think Ruff equals Davis. You wouldn't, for example, you would not project a player to have reverse platoon splits. And so people are saying, oh, JD Davis had reverse platoon splits. That's something that's happened in very tiny samples. If you look at his actual plate appearances versus, lefties and righties, he hasn't even had a lot of plate appearances overall. So you just wouldn't project him to have reverse platoon splits going forward. So Davis and Ruff, I would describe them as such. They're both righties that are projected to be about 10% better than league average and can't play defense. I don't care which one I have, honestly. I mean, yeah. I would take the guy with more team control and was cheaper, I think they're the same guy. Maybe the Mets are just like, nope, Ruff is doing it this year, and that's all we care about. We want this year guy, this year JD Davis, rather than wait around for JD Davis to do what he's supposed to do. But the Giants can afford to wait around for JD Davis to do what he's supposed to do and collect a little bit, collect some interesting players along the way.
I know we're 10 minutes out from all the pencils down tweets, which are just an inevitable fun part of the trade deadline every single year. But as suggested, more deals are rolling in. Robert Murray, who I just mentioned, has a tweet. The Braves are acquiring Raisel Iglesias from the Angels, sending back Jesse Chavez and Tucker Davidson. So we'll see if there's anything else involved in that trade. But Tucker Davidson is having a nice year at AAA, kind of an extra pitcher in Atlanta's organization right now. We know the Angels are looking for pitching anywhere they can find it. And at least if he ends up in Anaheim, Tucker Davidson gets a pretty long window at the end of this season to be a starter at the big league level. And I imagine he'd get a chance to open 2023 in that role for the Angels as well.
Yeah. I think I'm a little bit. I think Tucker Davidson's okay. It's not somebody I would have tried to get. I think Raisel Iglesias makes the Braves a lot better. I think it's an okay deal. I think it probably they would have gotten better return if they'd paid it down some. But the Braves are like, fine. We'll pay that money. It's fine. And it is interesting to think about that in tandem with Kenley Jansen. And some of the injury issues he's had. Are they willing to pay that sort of money going forward for two closers? But that's something you figure out next year, I guess.
So we are going to hit a really quick break to check in with one of our sponsors, and we should have Keith Law joining us to talk about some of the young players that were moved at this deadline here in just a moment. So stay with us.
We have partnered with BetterHelp. How well would you take care of your car if you had to keep the same one your entire life? That's how our brains work, so why don't we treat them that way? How we care for our minds affects how we experience life, so it's important to invest time and care into keeping them healthy. There are plenty of ways to support a healthy brain, like learning a new language, taking power naps. If you're a baseball fan, maybe it's going down to the batting cage, taking some swings, taking out some aggression, getting some exercise in. But there's also BetterHelp Online Therapy. BetterHelp is online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat-only therapy sessions, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy. You can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. And our listeners at the Athletic Baseball Show get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/MLB show. That's better, HELP.com/MLB show.
All right, we'll have Keith Law hopefully here in just a moment. Saw him connect for a second. The thing we're staring at right now, of course, on the Twitter feed, are there more moves happening? That Iglesias trade we were just talking about is one that I didn't think that was going to happen. I'd seen his name in a few stories, in a few tweets, but I didn't think the Angels were necessarily going to move him right now.
Yeah, and I should check Tucker Davidson a little bit closer. Not a good fastball shape. Curveball looks like a league average pitch, and the slider could be a league average pitch. So maybe you can really dial down the four-seam fastball if he can command the slider for strikes and try to get a 30-30-30 guy out of him where he's hiding the fastball. Still a chance that he's a starter. Long term. So I guess it's worth it for the Angels. Also, as some commenters are pointing out, does open up, some salary for them to play with next year.
Yeah, if that's what they're after, financial flexibility, they're getting it. Atlanta taking on that salary, and it's rough if you are playing fantasy baseball and you were looking for saves from Raisel Iglesias. He's going to have a harder time getting those in Atlanta, given the crowd in that bullpen. So a bit of a salary dump there for the Angels. Let's talk about a few teams that have had weird deadlines. And if we get Keith back in, we'll, of course, bring him up and talk to him. But the Red Sox, what do you make of the Red Sox deadline? We talked about Christian Vasquez getting flipped to Houston earlier. They added Tommy Pham in a trade. They brought in Reese McGuire to backfill at catcher. So it's going to be Reese McGuire and Kevin Plawecki behind the plate. And then earlier in the day on Tuesday, when we, for a moment, thought that Eric Hosmer could somehow derail the Juan Soto trade with his no trade clause, that didn't happen, of course. But then Boston swooped in and ended up making a move to get Eric Hosmer. So Hosmer, Pham, and McGuire in, Vasquez out. Are the Red Sox just trying to stay afloat until they get healthier?
Yeah, I think, the Red Sox were getting some of the worst production in baseball out of their first base slot. And the Padres in the leaked deal for Soto had already sort of demonstrated that they would pay down, most of the Hosmer deal. So it was like, it wasn't a question of, do we get Hosmer and pay him $39 million plus the 4 or 5 million left on this year? Or it was obvious that it was out there that the Padres would pay down 39 million of it, supposedly, in the Soto deal, like the rest of it. So now you're just talking about, do we want Eric Hosmer for 5 million over the next 3 years or 4 years? And I guess that makes it more palatable. I think it's interesting that a prospect of any sort went back to the Padres. I guess they were just trying to stay under the luxury tax threshold this year. Maybe they did it. And then they got Jay Groom, who has had a wild ride through his development. He's got a great story, a crazy story of just up and down his whole life. He's trying to get back into the big leagues. I think he has a chance as a reliever at this point. The strikeout rate and the swing strikes have been dropping over time. But if you look at all that through the lens of, could he be a great lefty reliever for us? I think that changes things. And if you got a lefty reliever and $5 million and got Hosmer off the roster, I think that was a little bit of magic by AJ Preller.
The Mets, we talked about them a bit before with the Darren Ruff addition. JD Davis is out. They sent 3 minor leaguers back to the Giants as well. Thomas Sapucki, Nick Swak, and Carson Seymour all going the other way. People are frustrated with the Mets right now, Mets fans especially. Michael Givens also added. So when you look at what they did and you think about Jacob deGrom, who's been an ace in the hole, the player you've been waiting for to coming back on trade deadline day, no less, what could the Mets have done differently? What should the Mets have done differently at this deadline at a time when everybody else who's contending was so active?
I think they were blocked a little bit in that they had these like high-priced free agent acquisitions at all these positions. So what are you going to do? Are you going to tell Eduardo Escobar that, are you going to DFA him? Or are you going to push him, into really part-time role by acquiring a third baseman when there wasn't really, am I missing a third baseman that was traded? I guess Drury, you're going to pull in Drury. I guess you could pull in Drury, but, I think that they were like, hey, if we want a right-hander, it doesn't need to be one that plays the bases because we've got Escobar, we've got some flexibility in the defense thing. So, yes, I think this is the biggest. I think this is the biggest thing they could have done. I think they should have gotten Wilson Contreras,
right?
Because then they have no holes anywhere.
Wilson Contreras didn't go anywhere. It's not like you lost out because some other team came in with better prospects or prospects that the other team wanted more than your guys. You didn't do it.
Yeah, and I guess the Mets drew a line. I think Vientos, if the line was we won't trade Mark Vientos, I like Beatty a lot more. I can see not wanting to trade Beatty. I can see not wanting to trade Alvarez. But Vientos, I don't know. Why couldn't you have traded Vientos and gotten Robertson and Contreras? Then you get 2 rentals that help your team. I just feel like I think that might have been a miss there, but maybe their internal valuations are very bullish on Vientos. That's totally possible. There are people who love Vientos.
Get to a few more teams. I mentioned the Brewers a little earlier as being a bit of a puzzling team so far. No late moves from them. The Cardinals making that late trade with the Yankees also added Jose Quintana and Chris Stratton. So with Montgomery, Quintana, and Stratton, did the Cardinals do enough to fix the pitching woes they have in the rotation?
Yeah, it's really interesting. They must bet on command, but they also employ Dakota Hudson. So,
Zing.
I like Quintana as like a low level, didn't cost much. I thought that was a great acquisition. That's great because give season to season you bet on stuff, but in season if a guy's showing good command, hey, this is a guy who's done it before. He has 3 pitches. He has good command. Like, he can get us there. He's not a guy you would not want to start in your second game. He's not a what do we do when we're there guy, but the Cardinals need to get there, So like I like the Quintana. Stratton is an undervalued guy with a really big hammer curveball that can help in the bullpen. He can also still maybe do some double innings. So, that I think that trade I love. Montgomery for Bader. When we did do you remember when we did the player tiers to start the year?
Yeah, it's a while ago.
And people were very split on Harrison Bader, and we talked to a few scouts, and a few scouts just said we don't think he has the bat to play. Basically, wasn't really a question about his glove. And here's the Yankees team that's saying no, we like his bat enough. And the things that I used to like about Bader as a bat have fallen away in a way. Like he used to be a guy who barreled the ball, but he doesn't now. He barrels the ball at basically below average for a starter. So you've got a guy who's okay offensively. He's a guy who's going to be worse than league average offensively, who's good defensively. I guess what the Cardinals are saying is his defense is only going to get worse. And we've seen the best of his offense. Let's just install Carlson in center.
I mean, that makes sense as far as how they're going to backfill. And if the Cardinals couldn't get more out of Harrison Bader's bat by now, it wasn't going to happen there. But with the organization change and the park change, there's a little bit of extra reason to be optimistic about what could happen with the move to the Bronx for Bader.
Yeah. The park change. I think it's a weird thing though, because that doesn't change his true talent, right? That's like something for fantasy. Like, yeah, I like Bader in New York better. That's a good trade for me I've got Bader in some fantasy leagues, some dynasty leagues. I like this trade, but in terms of true talent, it doesn't change it unless they see those old barrel rates and they say, we think we can get him back. Like if you can get Bader back to barreling the ball even 8% of the time, then he's going to have league average power. And he's shown league average plate discipline. And this year has better than league average strikeout rate. So you could say as a team, can we Frankenstein him? Can we put together the best parts of him? Like where we've got this discipline from these 2 years and this strikeout rate from these 2 years and this barrel rate from these 2 years. Can we make this happen? Or maybe even can we just go back to the one that struck out more but hit the ball harder? Maybe he's going to get rewarded in this ballpark more often. And we think that's a better approach for him. Either way, it's an interesting trade. I think the Cardinals needed Montgomery probably more than they needed Bader.
That makes sense given their depth. I'm surprised that after adding a pitcher, which made sense with the Severino injury, I'm looking at this Yankees rotation, and it's Cole, Montas, Nestor Cortez, Taillon, Domingo Germán for now. Eventually, Luis Severino moves back in. Like that's the part I'm really not sure about. And maybe there's still something hanging out there. We're 20 minutes past pencils down now, so the hope is fading a little bit. But did the Yankees give up a true mid-rotation starter in Jordan Montgomery? Do you buy him as being that good, that impactful?
Who's that?
Jordan Montgomery.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I'd make him when we get back to this conversation. Is he a 1 or a 2?
He's like a 3.
He's a 3, but everybody needs a 3, and the Yankees need a 3. Germán to me is a guy that I would be very excited to push to the bullpen. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think he could see some growth there in terms of the velo going up, in terms of not throwing certain pitches more. Is it? Clark Schmidt? Isn't he hurt?
Luis Heel, guys like that.
Well, he's Tommy John.
Right.
So I mean, just in the very short term, who's pitching? I guess it's just Germán.
It has to be Germán in the short term. Yeah.
I mean, it's wild to me, dude. It's like this is a team that could do anything, and they're just like, we got 5 started pitchers. Here we go. Hold on. Yeah, Clark Schmidt. That's the guy that they must say he's our depth. He's optioned to AAA. He's pitching pretty well in AAA, at least by strikeout rate. My model likes him. So, let me see what I got on Clark Schmidt. I think I guess they say we got Clark Schmidt. Yeah, he looks like a good pitcher. That must be it. Clark Schmidt must be the answer.
Yeah, Davy Garcia still in the system at Double-A, had a finger injury. I think he just recently got healthy again. So we'll see if there's maybe a bullpen role or something for him at some point. But
Yeah, because you need
was a
like
twist.
long guys too, right? Like you need guys that were starting pitchers to come up and be kind of long guys. So, anyway, yeah, and that's a good point too by James Rogers. It's not like there were some other guys that might have been able to step in that are now on other teams. So this is a real bet on the guys they have and not suffering any more injuries.
I'm rapidly scrolling through the timeline just to make sure nothing else has actually come through in the last 10 minutes or so. Nothing jumping off the page at the moment. A couple of questions just about the long-term situations now. I don't think we're going to be able to get Keith. I think we're having some technical issues getting him on the screen. So I'm looking at what the Nationals got back. And I got to say, like for a team that probably had a bottom 5, bottom 7 system pretty easily going into the day, they picked the right team to trade with. What do you think about the Nationals' future? Trading Juan Soto is terrible if you're a Nationals fan, but if you're going to do it, you have to get a haul back. And I think this is about as well as you can do in terms of ceiling and floor and of high volume of players that can actually change your franchise for the long haul.
Yeah, it's hard because you're like, okay, well, half of these guys won't make it, and it's like that's the saddest thing about prospects, half of them won't make it, and you're like, oh, these we're really excited about these guys, and then you look at the rankings. When I see that, I saw somebody had a joke. This guy is huge. He hits the ball really hard. He's basically William McCovey. Oh, so he must be the best prospect in baseball, right? No, it's around 40.
Right.
And if you think about it, like 40 is best. The bust rates down there are worse than 50%. So I like James Woods, and he might be the star of the deal. But he's also 6'7", and not every 6'7" guy who hits for power ends up being Aaron Judge. So there was that guy. Was it Singleton for the Astros?
Yeah, Jonathan Singleton.
He was a real tall guy that hit for power. I'm not saying that because Singleton, Woods won't, but I'm just saying, like, so half these guys won't work out. So you could just be like, oh, I'm going to be cynical. I've got people in my group chats that are like this. They say CJ Abrams doesn't hit the ball hard. He doesn't hit the ball hard. Can he, scratch out an existence not hitting the ball hard or learn to hit the ball hard because he's young? Sure. But, CJ Abrams doesn't hit the ball hard. Hassel, there's not really an obvious a problem with him other than just that sometimes it doesn't work out. So, I had a scout put a Mark Kotsay comp on him. And if that is working out, right?
That's
there's
good major league player.
There's also working out and not being Juan Soto. You know what I mean? Like,
you didn't get a Soto back. It doesn't work like that. That's just not. That's not how this game is.
And Susana is like super exciting. He throws the ball hard. He's also super young. He could end up being a reliever. What if you got Mark Kotsay and like even a really good reliever? Like say you got Mark Kotsay and Aroldis Chapman and John Singleton out of this deal. You know what I mean? Like
there's 3 more players on the screen. Come on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm saying CJ Abrams is if he doesn't hit the ball hard is I mean, yeah, I guess he could still be like a Luxian type player, right? Where Lux doesn't hit the ball hard and he provides value to his team.
My biggest issue with doesn't hit the ball hard is when we're talking about players that are as young as CJ Abrams is. I don't think CJ Abrams is done growing. I think you get to a point. I'm not saying we should ignore it. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. And it certainly could be a lower ceiling than expected, but we're talking about a 21-year-old that can get a lot stronger. If CJ Abrams is still hitting the ball at the same exit velocities when he's 24, is he at 21? All right, great. I don't know if we're far enough into the process to know that with a lot of confidence that what you see now is what you get with a 21-year-old in terms of exit velocity.
We've seen a little bit with Wander Franco. Where it's like, oh, he doesn't hit the ball hard enough, and then he's hitting the ball harder, and then he got hurt. And there's steps forward, steps back. Yes, I'm willing to give that. I'm also interested in this. This is a good point here that top fives do work out more often. No top fives got traded unless where do you put Abrams if he is still a prospect? Some guys might have him in that top 10 bucket, in which case he'd be the best prospect that was traded at the deadline. But, one thing I was going to ask Keith that I think is interesting is, so we saw this year, we saw an 18 on his list. We saw an 18 and a 20 get traded. That was Hassel and Wood. Oh, Marte.
Yeah, Marte.
Marte and Hassel, I think. That's 18 and 20, right? So you got Hassel and Marte traded. And then you have Wood as like a 40, right? As a 40th on his recent update. And then last year I looked and we had Austin Martin, who he had sort of 20 something, 21 or 22. And then his next one was Keibert Ruiz, who had 50. So, is this a trend? Are teams loosening up? Or is it just the Padres? It's just like a massive Padres move that makes it look like there's a trend. I have talked to people internally at teams. They're like, oh yeah, I think prospects are overrated and we should, if we have a chance, we should make a move. But I would say that I'm going to say TBD on whether or not we saw actual sort of sea change this year when it comes to trading prospects.
Yeah, I think you can't necessarily count this year as a good year that establishes what a normal trade deadline is going to look like, because players like Juan Soto are extremely rare in the first place, and it's obviously almost unprecedented for a player like that to be traded. I do want to take a look at the return one more time that the Reds got for Luis Castillo, if only because I think this is the possible outlier, right? Noelvi Marte, Edwin Arroyo, Levi Stout, and Andrew Moore. It's the two infielders up top, because Arroyo is one of those guys that when prospect lists come out this winter and before the 2023 season, he's going to be one of the biggest movers. Marte was already highly regarded, and maybe Stout ends up being kind of a back-end starter. Moore might be more of a reliever. That could end up being like the trade you want to make if you're not contending at any given time, where you have a very good, if not elite, starting pitcher that you can trade who's not a rental. That might be your best path to acquiring players that are top 20, top 25 prospects. Wherever you want to draw that line, that might be it. This might be the thing you're hoping for your team if you don't have an immediate win now sort of path.
Yeah, team control is everything, and you saw very few rentals return much on this deadline, but you did see players with team control bringing back something. The Reds, I think, let me say, I don't think the Reds should have sold, and I don't. They were a decent team a couple years ago, and they could have just held the line and tried to get better and better every year. But given that milieu that they're a seller, I thought they did good. Like Encarnacion Strand and the two shortstops they got there, that's legit, man. Those are some really good. You pair that with Ellie De La Cruz, now you got I'm sure that they vaulted up in, there's the Fangraphs has almost real time farm rankings, and they said that the Padres dropped to 28th during this trade deadline. But I would have to think that the Reds at least pushed their way into sort of top 5, top 10. I'm willing to wait to see what Keith says, but I think they did a really good job, improving for the future.
Yeah, so a lot to track. And I think one thing that I was thinking about earlier today, if the Dodgers didn't add a position player, to me, that was a sign that they were going to bring up Miguel Vargas. Looks like from the chat, they might be making that move because they've had some lingering uncertainty about the health and performance of both Justin Turner and even to a greater extent, Max Muncy. You and I have talked about that for probably 2 months now. And I think not trading Vargas as part of a deal to get pitching or whatever it is they wanted, I think that means, hey, we believe in this guy and he's going to be at least a part of our team as we try and win a title this year.
Yeah, and Vargas is a really exciting player. I think that I'm checking this, but I think that they were playing him in the outfield a little bit because, are you going to bring up Miguel Vargas and just sit Turner a couple times a week?
Preventative maintenance occasionally.
Maybe you could sit Turner a couple times a week and
Muncy against some of the tough lefties.
And Vargas is a righty. I'm salivating a little bit at Vargas because I just love guys who have sub 20 strikeout rates and good walk rates and hit for power. That I just love it. And then on top of that, he doesn't steal a lot of bases where you're like, oh, he's going to steal 30 or 40 or 50, but he steals enough bases that you're like, this is an athlete. You know, this is not a lumbering, slow, 3-2 outcomes guy. This is a guy who can move. So I'm excited. I remain a little bit cautious about like how much he's going to play. It sounds like he's only been playing on the infield. So, but I think you could probably get 5 times a week out of this Dodgers team.
Yeah, 4 to 5 starts a week. Yeah,
and maybe that's enough to be like, hey, we at least want to see. And could he edge somebody out? Could he move Muncy to first base all the time and Lux to backup? Maybe.
Chris Taylor will be back soon too, which will make things a little bit better in the outfield. So they may have the too many good players problem again really soon in Los Angeles. Disappointing deadlines. How about the White Sox? Have we mentioned them on the entire show? It's been over an hour, and this is a team that we thought would win the division when the season started, and they could still be a playoff team. They could still even be a dangerous playoff team, but a few things have gone wrong.
Lefty reliever or something?
Jake Diekman, right?
Yeah, who has zero command. That'll be funny. And apparently this has something to do with all these high price relievers they got aren't back-to-back guys.
Very strange that they didn't do more. I would have been sure that they would have been more active. A little surprised the Rays didn't do more, but I think a lot of that has to do with the injuries they have dealt with, most specifically Wander just not being healthy. I don't know if they wanted to push chips in for this season, given the current state of things.
Yeah, they did go get David Peralta. We're talking about the Rays, right?
Yeah,
they got David Peralta, and I think he's one of the best. TL, yeah, Tony is napping right now. Did you see that? They caught him on camera napping in the first inning. He was falling asleep.
I actually did not see that.
When I was doing my vibes reporting back in the day, like my vibes reporting was saying there was very low energy there, and that's what I was talking about. The Jose Siri move. There we go. That's the other one. We know that the Rays had a problem in center. And Josh Lowe, I thought they might just plug and play Josh Lowe and say, hey, we're going as far as you're going to take us, dude, at least till Manny Margot comes back. But trading for Jose Siri was an eye-opening one because he kind of profiles a little bit like Brett Phillips, where he doesn't make a lot of contact, but when he does, he hits it hard. He just makes a little bit more contact than Brett Phillips, I guess, enough for them to say this is exciting. He's also, like Brett Phillips, an elite defender. So you get an elite defender in center that has more offensive upside than Brett Phillips. I'm surprised that's worth trading for, but it's Jose Siri and David Peralta, and that's an offensive upgrade for a team that needed offensive upgrade. I think the rest of it is them just being like, the Jacob deGrom move. Our post-deadline acquisitions are going to be all our guys that are coming off the IL.
Oh, yeah. No, the Brewers had a great deadline. They got Freddie Peralta coming back.
Yeah, exactly. So
I mean, that's just so frustrating.
But what do you want the Rays to do? They're not even in it for the division, I don't think, anymore. So it's just a question of winning a wild card round, and I think they can do that. So it's get better on the margins and hope for some good luck from the returning guys. I think that's about it.
And they've got a lot of young depth, so maybe they wait till the offseason, possibly make moves when there's a 40-man crunch and address their longer-term needs that way. I just thought maybe between Lowe and Brujan and Jonathan Aranda and Curtis Mead that they would maybe trade one or possibly two of those guys, but we're almost 40 minutes now past the deadline. So we're getting to that point where I'm not expecting more things to happen. If anything does happen, it will be a very pleasant surprise.
How about this? We're trying to make sense of it, right? What if you let's avert your eyes from Jerry DiPoto and AJ Preller. Don't look at what they've done and look at what the other 28 teams have done. I think it does make sense. There are more teams in the playoffs, so there were fewer sellers. But there are also more teams in the playoffs that aren't getting that first week bye and may only get one home game in the playoffs. How much are you going to mortgage for that one home game in the playoffs? if that's all you get. So I think other than AJ and Jerry DiPoto, you got a lot of cautious small buys. Oh, even prospect for prospect, Marsh for Ohop. Like those are all team control. Let's make our team better now and the future. Yeah, like the Guardians, they just don't. I guess they just don't have any money. We did a show where we said they should have some money, but they're acting like they don't have any money.
They do. They just aren't spending it. Well, we are going to wrap things up. Thanks to those of you who check this out live. If you'd like to get a subscription to The Athletic and get one for $1 a month for the first 6 months at theathletic.com/baseball show, you can find Eno on Twitter at Eno Sarris. You can find me at Derek VanRiper. Thanks for watching. The Athletic Baseball Show returns on Thursday.